All right, guys, you are now live.
Welcome everybody to the regular meeting of the East Hampton Town Trustees for July 8th, 2024. And I'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. Arlene, can you do roll call, please?
John Aldridge,
Someone sign in?
Francis Bach,
Here. Here.
David Cataletto,
Here.
Patrice Dalton,
Here.
Ben Dollinger,
Here.
Tim Garneau,
Here.
Jim Grimes,
Yes.
Celia Josephson,
Here.
and William Taylor.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Start with public comment. Jean Gallant. Land Planning Service on behalf of Susan Halpern, owner of 48 Georgia Close Road, with a new application for Phragmite maintenance.
I haven't presented a frag thing to you guys before, so I'm not sure what you're looking for. Did everyone get pictures and?
I did not.
I have pictures, survey and,
Actually,
an aerial.
excuse me, Gene, I have it here.
Okay. I have extra copies if anybody needs to look at anything.
I think we should let her.
Do you have an extra?
present
Yeah.
on it.
Thank you.
Let the board ask any
Anybody else?
questions.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead. Please propose.
Yeah, I went to the property with Gene, so
It's,
it looked good based on the maintenance report. The application looked good.
we're just starting out the maintenance program, so have the property flagged. Saskis updated the survey with the area in question, and applications are underway.
Does anybody have any questions?
Sorry for the size of the photos
There's
right there.
basically 3 different spots there
Correct.
on the kind of the
You'll see that noted on the survey.
northwest corner of the property.
Do you have any concerns about further erosion after you remove the Phragmites?
No, you might have made note of it too when you were there. They're somewhat sparse a little bit. It's not a very heavy area, and they'll come in and be hand cut. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of disturbance. What they're hoping for is to just let some of the natural species come up around it.
There was a lot of other native species that were kind of
Yeah, it
filtered throughout there.
it doesn't look like a monoculture of Phragmites. Hey, your description, your narrative is pretty brief and somewhat vague. Are there any other invasives on the property in these areas that you're looking to control? And as far as the cutting, if you could give us, usually when you do the Phragmites cutting, first cut, remove it. Second cut, at a height of approximately 2 feet, cut it down to 6 inches, avoiding the native vegetation. That's usually what DEC is asking for.
Yeah, they, like I said, it's a new program to to them. So when they hire someone, when they finally are ready to move forward and hire someone, they want to go along with what the prescribed program is, which is
Yeah,
just what you're mentioning. Originally, he thought he'd do 2 times a year, but in my conversations with you in the past, you suggested that,
give yourself the latitude of cutting at a frequency that will actually work. So for example, let's say, and I'm just going to say, normally these projects are started in the winter time. It's a good time of the year. There's no ticks, whatever. You do the first cut, you do your removals. Then in the springtime, Phragmites reaches approximately 2 feet in height, which typically out here is once those soil temperatures are getting up around 65, 70 degrees, you'll see that growth initiate. You cut it. The first year, you're probably going to get some immediate recruitment within 4 to 6 weeks. We'll probably be cutting it again. So now we're up to 3 cuts. If you get a good warm season, you may actually get more growth. And you know what? You don't want to wait. You don't want to give the plant the opportunity to photosynthesize any more than necessary. You'll cut it a 4th time. I wouldn't limit yourself to the 2 cuts. That was sort of a methodology, a desired methodology that the DEC had years ago, where they would we only want you to cut it twice a year. Well, if you want to make the Phragmites grow well, yeah, cut it twice a year. But the goal here is not to annoy the Phragmites. The goal here is to reduce, the frequency of the plant.
since he started the application process, originally he was told by neighbors, generally choice, but we had someone come to the property to help identify the area so that we could assist Saskis when they came out and putting it on the survey appropriately. And he was told also by the person that had come to the property to help him identify that 2 was probably not going to be enough. So again, that was after we started the process.
The critical thing for you guys is put some language, and this is going to be in both our application, the village, and the DEC, is one, recognize and identify in your narrative that there are native species there. You may want to list those native species, and as part of that narrative, assure the permitting agencies that your cutting will not impact them, that you'll be working as there's natural recruitment in there, as the native vegetation is coming up, you will be doing selective cutting of just the target plant that you have in there. And I think that way there should be some alignment between us, DEC, the village, moving forward. And, this looks like it's going to be a project, it's going to be easily a success because these plants are already in some shade. They're not as robust and aggressive as you see in other areas. So I think you're going to see really good results here.
Yeah, that's what they're hoping for.
Within the first season, so.
Okay, yeah, that's what they're hoping for. And like I said, they had been told by neighbors choices should be
Well, you know
fine,
what
but
happens
that
is
didn't seem
years
to
ag-
be
yeah,
what
but
the
you know,
consultant said when he
yeah.
came to the property.
Gene, years ago, that was sort of the protocol. That has since changed. DEC recognizes that methodology really wasn't generating anything close to the results that you can and should get.
Okay.
So I'd like to make, anybody else? Question?
No, that sounds good. If you get the permit, you don't have to cut the photos. You just need the permission.
So do we need this narrative modified?
I'd like, your motion, I'll second the motion just with the condition that not modify your narrative. I think it's going to help you align with your other applications, because I'm assuming you don't have village, you don't have,
Working on it all, yeah.
Okay.
So also it's going to be quite a bit down the road, but when we send in the before the after, and we'll have to renew in November anyway. At that point, the narrative for what went on this year and what will be actually taking place next year can include, also the consultant could also provide us with what the native, what the invasive are, and a little more
Yeah,
detailed
no,
narrative
that,
for
the
you.
more information, the better, because, we want to protect, one, the integrity of the environment, but also the client, You want to basically be
Yeah,
able
so
to
to
know
speak,
that
yeah.
if you have that neighbor that doesn't agree with what you're doing, that you're not sticking your neck out, that you're bulletproof.
Mhm. Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Sylvia, did I give you back that application?
I have.
Yeah, favor? Yep, I was first. Jim? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go.
All right, next we have new business, an update on the horseshoe crab legislation.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to give you a brief update on a bill, it's called A10140. It was passed by New York State Senate and the New York State Legislature, Assembly. It has to go to the governor for signature, and it has not gone there yet. The Senate, it did not get unanimous approval. The Senate, it passed 53-7, and Assembly, it was 102-39. And I think the lines were along sort of the districts that were facing water and had actual, fishermen or watermen working in it, because they proposed to ban the taking of horseshoe crabs at all for any reason. And they combined it with commercial, which are usually those guys are taking it for bait. And they have a license and they have a quota. They can, it's sort of regulated. It's going to be completely banned. And they also went into some discussion about biomedical uses of the horseshoe crab blood, which is not a consideration for New York. I mean, we don't have any biomedical harvesting here. That's done in large-scale operations by big companies, generally in like South Carolina, not in New York, in states that will allow that, because
Hasn't there been a synthetic?
Yeah.
yes,
made?
there are a few synthetic options. So I think they've kind of conflated two things. One is the biomedical harvesting, and the other is the commercial harvesting by local fishermen who have licenses. The pictures of the biomedical harvesting are horrific. And they're very, they're really upsetting to see. But that's not what's happening in New York. So I think we just have to differentiate from that. That harvesting, the horseshoe blood is used because it gels in the presence of gram-negative bacteria. So if you want to test for the presence of gram-negative bacteria, the horseshoe blood is the biological component of an assay that is used. It's called the LAL assay. It's accepted by the FDA, by the World Health Organization. It's got a lot of certifications, and anything that comes up would have to beat it, be as good as or better than. And that's going to take some time to get that kind of certification done. Because if a pharmaceutical company tries to use the new assay, it may encounter additional requirements as opposed if they use the horseshoe crab blood. So that's one thing. And the companies that are doing that have also licensed or developed their own synthetic substitutes for horseshoe crab blood. So that should go away, but this legislation is really not germane to that. So the commercial guys are using it as bait for whelk and I think eels.
Mhm.
The DEC limits a horseshoe crab permit holder to 200 crab a day, and the state annual harvest is 150,000 crabs, horseshoe crabs. So the concern is among people that live in our area, like Assemblyman Thiel and Senator Palumbo, is more around getting input from the commercial community and seeing, is there a substitute for the horseshoe crab? You know, is there a substitute? Or could they manage this better with the quota? Or, gradually implement it rather than just say, okay, guys, this industry is really going to be hit hard.
Well,
So what did the bill, you said the bill passed the Senate and the Assembly for a complete ban?
yeah,
It's New York State, so it has
So
to go.
what's the comments? What's the point of soliciting comments?
at this point, governor hasn't signed it into law.
Were there comments solicited before the Senate and the Assembly?
I don't know. I haven't looked into all
Hey,
the
John, I didn't
memos.
hear anything going on in this until it was a done deal.
This happened very quickly, like then, one bill was passed and then the other was passed. And, it has a lot of support, but not necessarily from the maritime community. Only that, it's, have the commercial fishermen then have a seat at the table? Do they understand this? I don't know.
I'd hazard a guess they're dimly aware it's even happened. Here's what I find troubling with this is, and unfortunately, we're part probably of the problem at this point. Over the last few years, horseshoe crabs sort of notoriety has gotten more pronounced. Okay, as we've seen when we go down and count horseshoe crabs, we now have an audience. People come down here, they're into it.
Yes.
But a lot of the public that comes down and has a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, they're harvesting horseshoe crabs, we have to stop this. Because I encountered that this past season. We were down at Lazy Point one night, and there were these two women who were absolutely nuts down there, stomping around in the water, screaming they had just run the poachers off in the boat. And I'm like, well, last time I saw the poachers, they had cars. They didn't have a boat just yet. I walked around to the launching ramp. They didn't run anybody off. It was two guys with commercial permits harvesting crabs legally. Now, if that population is depleted, if the population trend is going down, certainly things should be done to limit or reduce or perhaps even ban the harvest of horseshoe crabs. But you know what I find troubling here is, let's take a 30-year span. 30 years ago, were there more or less baymen? John's a good one to answer that question because he's been involved in this for 30 years. John, is there more or less baymen working our East Hampton waters today as there were 30 years ago?
I think 30 years ago or 40 years ago, the Baymen's Association had 200 or 300 members.
Okay.
They don't exist today.
I think you can interpret this as 30 years ago, there was probably more horseshoe crabs being harvested. And over the last 30 years, this has been down to reduce. I only know like 3 or 4 people that do harvesting of horseshoe crabs out our way. Well, the data says the population may or may not be stable and it's more likely going down. Well, what I find sad here is we're going to ban harvesting of horseshoe crabs, and in 5 to 10 years, are we going to see an increase in the number of horseshoe crabs? And I'm going to speculate the answer is going to be no, because this is a little like ducks at the turn of the century. Yes, they were overhunted, but the duck population didn't begin to recover until one critical thing happened, and that was preservation of breeding habitat and increasing the area of breeding habitat. I think we're going to find ourselves in a similar situation with the horseshoe crab. And you know what? What bothers me here is, the local fisherman who's not driving a Mercedes, okay, these guys work their asses off a lot of times for very little, are the victims of the public's knee-jerk reaction to a situation they have little or no comprehension of. And that's why I feel like perhaps, Tim, John, and I, we've been out friggin' talking about the damn horseshoe crabs for the last 8 years. And it's great that the public is aware, but sometimes that public awareness can be sort of misdirected. And that's what troubles me here.
But the other thing that troubles me is that this year's census that you all did, you're counting the horseshoe crabs, and you seem to have a fair number compared to earlier years.
Oh, no, we're not a fair number. Our counts, it started last year. It has trended the same direction this year. For the same time period last year, my best count last year was, I think, 660 crabs. We hit that the second night.
Right.
We were counting. And then Ben and I had numbers over 1,000
Right.
throughout the peak breeding period. So we never saw anything even close to that. It was a freaking gangbang out there. It was a veritable orgy. But I don't think, we're only looking at this thing in a little narrow
Right.
frame. So I don't think those high numbers represent.
Not necessarily, but when somebody's going
picture.
to aggregate, there is somebody probably at U.S. Fish and Wildlife who's going to aggregate all the data, because they did this in Delaware. They did the counts the same nights as you did, and they have all these data, and they're going to have to update their model about how many there are this year. And I think another problem that we have is when COVID hit, the vaccines were all validated. All the vaccines,
Using horseshoe
crab blood. So we had an incredible demand, and it wasn't here in New York, but it was, in other places, to fulfill that need to validate the vaccines. So, there's a lot of things in play here. And all we can do is kind of write to the governor about what we think, our opinion, because it's, personal. But I do think that the fishermen should be involved.
Well, they should be involved, but you know what? And we found ourselves in this position in the past. We found ourselves in this position with the debate on the windmills. Sometimes somebody has to be that voice for the fishermen a little bit, because as much as you say, hey, you really should be doing this, here's the problem. Unlike my industry, I think on a large-scale commercial fishing industry, there's representation, there's seats at the table, and it's organized, and it exists, and it's progressive. And the results there, I think, if you talk to the individual commercial fishermen, they'll tell you, we haven't been very successful at holding ground with the agencies. I think for somebody like the Baymen, the fact that their numbers are so reduced, I think their representation may be almost non-existent.
Because there's the baymen, and then there's the nearshore fishermen, and then there's the real fishermen. I think these guys would be the nearshore fishermen, because they're not working in the bay necessarily.
Whatever.
Very fragmented. And when I do speak to them, they don't really know how they can contribute. They just don't. It's like, they haven't had a seat at the table for a long time. So
I mean, I agree we should weigh in on this, as far as we can go with it. I don't think we should start talking about cause and effect and
Well, I'm not,
Stuff like that.
I don't see our ability to truly do that because, let's face it, like this year, we had more crabs than we've ever counted. But when we were originally doing the class,
that's valid to point
up in
out.
with the DEC, they said, hey, the populations or the breeding activity is somewhat cyclical. It does follow highs and lows. I think we caught the wave of it coming up. I mean, what I am heartened by is I've been tagging, I think, for 6 years now. And this year, last year, okay, you found tags. The year before, you found a few tags. This year, we had like 27 recoveries of ones that we had tagged before, which I thought was pretty cool. One, the fact those individuals are still alive to show up and get counted. And they're, with no exceptions, every single one of them we tagged, okay? I was dying to find one that came from somewhere else, but it just didn't happen.
Do you know is there a time frame on?
The what?
On the way in,
Time frame on when the governor's?
The governor should get it by, look, their legislature's not in session now, so she should receive it by the end of the year. And then she has 30 days to sign off on it or it dies. But, I just think alternatives like a gradual phase out, like going from 150,000 to say 70,000 in a year and, let the fishermen find their way to get different bait.
well, there's been research in this, and it's pretty heartening. There are alternative baits that don't replace the horseshoe crabs, but act as extenders. So
Yeah.
you're using a smaller quantity of the crab to get the same results. And
Right.
your comment about a phased-in thing, basically to try and give these guys an opportunity to try it.
Mhm. Yeah, I heard about that synthetic bait.
Is there any update on that at the last training session? Because I went to a training session in probably 2019, and there was a big push for it then, and
It wasn't covered when we were there in the spring. The only thing I did get a note from Matt, the scientist in control, he said they had more recaptured tags that were released in our program 10 to 11 years ago. The data that was collected made it onto a poster presentation at the International Horseshoe Crab Conference in Singapore last month, and it's being used as shared as a model for other countries to learn how to implement the large-scale community monitoring programs, and, which I thought was kind of cool. But as far as the legislation, that really wasn't. It seems like it's kind of moved on. They're pretty far along if it's on the governor's desk right
do you
now.
happen to know where Cornell comes down on this?
I don't. They didn't. Again, it wasn't that it wasn't covered at all in any of the training.
Do we know who sponsored this bill?
Two people from New York City, Glick, I think was one of their names.
Somebody's got real skin in the game.
Yeah.
I can't,
Right?
but I do know that Senator Palumbo and Assemblyman Thiel voted nay. And along with other people like from Oyster Bay and Riverhead, and we should go out, I think it's a laudable goal, but how we get to that goal is the question.
Well, I think, some of the things we've discussed here, I think would be appropriate to put into a letter. I mean, I don't know how far that's going to go.
Can they separate the commercial from the medical? Even though it's not an issue in New York, I mean,
But the commercial,
yeah.
Was this two bills or one bill?
it's one bill. That's the confusing part, the conflating part, is that there aren't even any biomedical harvesting in New York. And then they put this together. And when they were questioned about why did you put in the biomedical, because we don't have that, They said, well, in case the other states try to tighten up their regs, they're going to come here, and this way we'll be prepared. It's like, it's sort of strange bill.
I can see that reasoning.
How long, obviously this happened pretty quickly, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, they really didn't put any effort into finding out whether it was valid or not.
I think they could have done better. Yeah. I think they rushed on it, and
Yeah, this is a save the crowd.
I brought this up at the last meeting, and, Jim, you mentioned, habitat, breeding habitat being, you feel, and I think you're right, is a big part of this
Yes.
problem. I put on the table for thought by the board that, maybe closing down some beaches to driving
Yeah.
or a beach to driving during the horseshoe crab breeding and gestation period of the young eggs might be some contribution we could make.
And that coincides with some of the bird migrations that we're concerned about. So, it makes sense, I think. The other thing is the hardscape, the hardening of the shoreline. The horseshoe crabs get stuck, and they can't get out. And you see, even people doing the census were carrying stuck horseshoes out. They're getting rocked, they can't get out.
Where's this?
So,
Where'd they get stuck?
yeah, they get stuck.
Our horseshoe crabs never get stuck.
We don't have hard
We
shoreline.
gotta pick
They're sort of-
pick the right kind of shoreline to study, though.
We made sure every one of our shoreline, or every one of our horseshoe crabs was
They're
educated.
absolutely amazing animal. I
How to
mean,
get out.
Little
they're
ladder.
so old. They're so ancient, and we would really want to protect
I have a
them.
feeling these things are fully capable of saving themselves.
Sure.
Oh, my gosh.
it this long.
So, 4 extinctions or something.
You know what's wild this year is
we
we had some really, really high tides
Yeah.
during like peak breeding.
That was a big
And-
part of it.
Where you found these things breeding was literally 100 foot back from the shore. They had made it over into like the salt marsh and found a spot and were doing their thing there, Clearly these animals are capable of, they might actually help the piping plovers out a little bit, because if the piping plovers could be shown to have that sort of latitude of where they have sex, we might have more piping plovers. Yes. No, it was wild.
Horseshoe crab should.
I don't know, listen, man, a little cross-training.
A little seminar.
All right, let's not go off the rails.
Well, this is.
Well, that was.
So who wants to work on this?
Oh,
You know, I don't know.
Is there any sort of group of commercial fishermen as a
Well, there's,
body anymore?
yeah,
I mean,
there's the Fisheries Advisory Committee of the town that brings all the fishermen together to discuss. I'm sure I'm not sure, but I would think they've discussed this. Or
It came up really quick, right?
the first I heard was, you brought it up a couple of meetings ago, that this was in the works.
Right.
Yeah. Now it's a done deal.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
Is there
brought
a
up as
contact
total
person
ban.
on that advisory committee, on the Fisheries Advisory Committee? Is there a contact
Well, David
person?
Lease, I think, was the liaison, or he was last administration.
It's probably Bayman up the whole eastern island too.
Yeah.
That would be interested, not just out here.
Yeah, I think the problem though is they're, less and less organized as times goes by.
Yeah.
The North Shore Baymen have been very organized in the past, and I think they still are to an extent, but it's usually just a couple of people that have political interests that usually drive these things. Like, that was like that with the Baymen here, they were all involved, but it was really just a few that really took it to Washington, took it to Albany, and
With the striped bass thing, it was, I think we should just draft a letter saying that we think this thing needs more thought. We oppose it in its current form.
It's interesting how fast they got pushed through it too.
Me and Allison are gonna do it. It's okay, just nod your head.
Drafting a letter for you, is that it?
It's basically all in the minutes.
Hopefully, if I got it right.
Jim, I'm
Thank
happy
you
to
for the
review letter
input.
As well.
Yeah.
Send it
Hey,
my way, please.
Patrice, do you have a copy of this law?
Yes,
Can you
I
fo-
have it, I have the URL here.
Oh, okay, if you
And
could forward over to me, that'd be
Yeah.
great. I'm lousy at that stuff.
It's funny because it's a very long law, but the part that pertains to horseshoe crabs is very small. I'll send it to you.
All right.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any old business they want to discuss? Okay. Committee reports, aquaculture, harmful algal blooms report.
Well, there was just sampling done on the July 3rd. Yeah, July 3rd. And Wainscott Pond again came in elevated at 140 micrograms per liter. That's a little bit down from 145, which it was on June 19th. But the bad news is that Pond Lane Pond came in with some numbers, fairly low, 32.9, but they're finding some blue-green algae in the pond.
Which pond was that, John?
Pond Lane Pond up in Lionhead.
Is that the one that was pretty challenged last year?
Well, the Pond Lane, if this is accurate, the Pond Lane Pond is the one that wasn't so bad. I don't think it had any green algae last year.
And they tested both of them at the
It's
same time.
the Swan Pond.
There's two right next to each other.
Yeah.
The other one's clear.
Which is which?
Swan, this Pond Lane Pond is farther away from the inlet.
Okay.
Swan Pond.
Okay.
I think it's a little higher in elevation maybe.
There's a few more houses on it too.
No, I think they both have about the same amount of houses around. Also, there were some readings for, I don't know what some readings for Fort Pond at some elevated levels at Industrial Road and A level, which was below the limit, so it wasn't a really threatening level at the ramp. I guess that's down at the south end. So there seems to be some blue-green algae activity in Fort Pond as well. So these things usually come up about before we have a meeting, so.
Yeah.
See in the future.
All right. Mosquito larvae survey.
Well, I got a couple of volunteers actually for this time, and three volunteers, two young people from out of town who were, I didn't think people did this anymore, but they came to town, went to Hither Hills, camped there for 3 weeks or so before reservations started, and then got a place to rent in town.
Yeah.
So it's encouraging. It's kind of how I came down. And a fellow from the Ecobonic Protection Committee, Vincent, is also helping out. So we went out last Wednesday on the 3rd, just to sort of familiarize them with the methodology, and we did find some very small stage 1 larvae then. And then we went out this morning. Actually, can you put that chart up on or that map up on we were able to actually sample an area down near the Pollock Krasner house, between the Pollock Krasner house and Merrill Lake Sanctuary that we hadn't been able to sample before. Is this the one that's positive dips?
This is the all dips. Would you like the positive one?
Well, so this is represents all the dips that we're taking. The next slide represents, no, that's the all. That's all the dips that we're taking.
It's positive.
This is all the dips that we're taking, and those are the ones that tested positive. So we're able to test down near the lower left corner, that area from the Park Rasmus House, almost to Springs Church, up to the Merrill Lake Sanctuary, which we haven't tested for a couple of years. And then usual hotspots, the larvae were much larger, and there were actually a lot of in the pupae stage as well, so they're just about ready to hatch. So. Treatment will take place this week. There was some interest on the part of some of these volunteers to see the helicopter, how the helicopter, deposited the pelletized treatment. And Tom Iwaneko from Vector Control is going to let us know exactly when the helicopter will fly so they can look at it. So I can send that to the board if anybody else wants to check it out.
People
They
always
did
want to.
Napeag Harbor there, it was a week or two ago.
Cedar Point.
They're going to do it again
Cedar
this
Point
week.
Park.
Yeah,
Did they do it?
They did all the areas.
it was pretty big, it was pretty thick down there.
There's a lot of breeding island water.
Yeah.
It's been very warm, and we've had some rain, and tides have been cooperative.
Do they only use the pellets now, or do they do other spraying?
County only uses the pellets. I think, probably private people can hire contractors to use all sorts of nasty things.
I saw in the newspapers that they found 4 cases of West Nile.
Did that too.
About
It's in Suffolk County, but nothing out here, but
It's very early for us now.
I mean, that's going to get them in a very pro mosquito eradication kind of.
It's true.
West Nile and Eastern equine encephalitis are the two big scary vectors. So.
Anything else on that? Okay.
Thanks, John.
We'll move on to administrative payment of the bills. We have East Hampton Marina, $331.85 for fuel. Montauk Anglers Club, $972.42 to service the boat. Optimum, $123.25. And then this is an estimate for an event, right?
Yes, this is just
When is the event?
the 20th of July.
Okay,
And it's just for transparency, so you know what's coming.
right. This is held by, I think, Natural Resources, correct?
Yes, they're paying the leashes and all that other stuff.
Right. So they do a Dogs and Donuts event down at the beach. I guess you want to explain what?
Yeah, so it's to educate people about the piping plovers. And even though they're gone now, it's to show them, like, dogs have leashes, so they're going to give out leashes and suggest to people that you leash your dog on the beach. I think that's another thing that's really problematic, that people are letting their dogs run wild. And it's not just disturbing piping plovers, it's disturbing people too. Or they're going to show that, they're going to show information about piping plovers, like what they look like and, you know, how they're ground nesting and how they're vulnerable. Predation is high and things like that. And so trying to get people involved in that, and kids had drawn pictures last year. You've seen them?
No, I haven't.
They're really cute. They're very colorful piping plovers. But I mean, up island, people have been taking photographs of piping plovers that are just phenomenal. I mean, like up near Smith's Point Park, places like that. They're just, so that will be on the 20th, and it's early, and I think it's going to start around 8 or 9, and it's going to only be a couple of hours. It would be with U.S. Fish and Wildlife will be there.
What beach?
Atlantic.
So in the past, we've kicked in to pay for the donuts in this event. So the estimate for that is $407.34.
Very specific estimate.
Yeah, it's only an estimate.
It's a pretty, that includes
Definitely.
tax, I assume. Yeah.
Well, we don't know how many people are going to be there, so we wanted to get coffee, you know, bring up coffee.
Or leftovers coming back to the office. You want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Financials for the months ending May 31st are available for review.
I reviewed them. They're in very good. They look very good to me. I mean, I think,
You're in good shape.
yeah, I think there's, Arlene is doing a really nice job of keeping them up to date. And
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I have one thing under report of the clerk. So we have a mooring holder down in Northwest Harbor. He renewed for this season. I'm sorry?
Creek.
It
Northwest
says
Creek.
harbor. I'm just reading. what it says. So it's the creek. He renewed his mooring permit for the season, but he's now in need of hip replacement in September, so he's unable to use his sailboat. So he has apparently a rig, line, and pulley system.
It's Mr. Gold.
I'm not using names, huh? He has a neighbor friend who also has a pull mooring in the creek, and he's offered him a 15-foot bluefin motorboat to use, for them both to use for this season. So this would be a second boat for his friend, but it would be on someone else's mooring, okay?
So he's not putting his sailboat in
He's
the
not
water?
putting a sailboat in because of his hip. He's unable to maneuver getting on and
He's gonna
off.
put this motorboat in instead?
And he can apparently handle the motorboat. When he first called to request, he asked if he could let his friend put his boat on the mooring and with him take it out occasionally.
This is the motorboat.
Yes. He then said that his friend is essentially letting him use the boat for the season.
Okay, so what's the problem?
It's a 15-foot bluefin dory. It's not registered, but has a motor, so it will need to be registered. These are our mooring rules. Okay? New York State requires electric and gas motors to be registered. Then the question is, if the boat is registered to one person, can it be put on another person's mooring?
Well,
And I didn't want to answer this, so I'm leaving it up to you
I don't
guys.
think our rules state that. I think it's gotta be your boat, but I don't see why we can't, bend our rules on a case-by-case basis in a situation like this.
Second.
All in favor?
Conditional on registering the boat.
Okay.
we're
Let Reed Mitchell know.
approving them to do it with the condition that the boat gets registered.
Yes.
Okay.
Is the boat registered out of state or not registered at all?
My understanding.
It's not stone.
Do they require, do we require, insurance for moorings?
Only in our large boat bridge currently.
Only in
Only in the large boat bridge.
larger boats?
Currently.
What does that start at?
Say that again?
What size does that large boat count?
20 feet for sailboats, 25 for motor.
Then you have to have insurance to moor it here,
They have to provide proof of liability insurance and
which is what I have to do
environmental
for the
spill
town
coverage.
for my 17-foot awesome mower.
He did say though, today on the phone, that he would be willing to provide proof of insurance for this situation if the board required it.
Did we put that on there?
I have one more thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, anybody have anything else you want to talk about before we adjourn?
I just heard from Cornell today about the trawl survey. So they're getting ready to do the summer trawl survey off the Ocean Beach for our,
Did we get a report on the last one?
there was a report, but there was no meeting called
Right.
to explain it.
Is the report available to us?
I don't know if it was,
Okay.
information. I'm gonna try to get Cornell and Stony Brook to give us a report. So I'm not sure why Orsted's in charge of this one. They're paying for it. They're in charge.
Right.
And they have in the past called the meetings to give the reports
Right.
to us.
Right, we've sat through a couple of them.
And this year they didn't. So I was going to see if Cornell and Stony Brook would give the trustees a report directly. And I expect that they're gonna have to check with Orsted and we'll find out if there's a problem.
It's a great idea.
What's that?
I think it's a great idea, because actually they come to one of our meetings, deliver this report, the public basically gets the information. Anybody that was curious should, probably would be in Orsted's interest to let them.
I would think. But, Anyway, they're planning on starting this trawl survey, I think later this week. I'm not quite sure about that. We'll put it on the website, the detailed information. I know that, in the past, these have all been the same. Fishermen can contact Cornell directly or contact the sampling boat, the Bulldog from Shinnecock, directly on VHF, Marine Channel 16 or 13. And there will be a phone number for the Cornell representative on the boat that they can also speak to if they have any interest, especially fixed gear fishermen that want to notify the boat of the location of their gear if they haven't already been contacted by Cornell. I know they have an ongoing dialogue with the fishing community out there, but if there's somebody that just isn't aware of it, has set gear, they can contact the boat during the survey to let them know where their gear is, and the boat will, the trawler will stay away from it. So those details will be on our website.
Anybody else?
I have one small thing. I know that Rob Vasilev was at Cedar Point Park this weekend, and they collected a lot of eelgrass seeds. The divers go in and they collected them, and I think he's going to be there for a couple of weeks to come doing that. I'm not sure. Do you know where those seeds are going to be planted, or?
In East Hampton, they're going to be planted in Napier Harbor, on the east side of Napier Harbor.
And some in Great South Bay?
Yeah, I think he's got other locations in other towns, but I'm not sure where. It's probably in some past minutes somewhere.
Yes, I know. But there's a lot. You can see in the photograph, you can see how much eelgrass there actually is, more than I thought.
There's a good strong bed in the bay off Cedar Point. It has been.
Yeah.
On Rocky Point, Montauk, you got a good stand there too.
Got it? Have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
All in favor?
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.